All right. So, just making sure. Okay, we're recording. So, one of my all-time favorite articles that I just think is kind of cool, but there's also questions in this article that have been raised. We can examine this from the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Do our words create abilities when we're able to use them? And so this paper is not without criticism, and it's fair. I just like it. I kind of thought it was a good idea the first time I read it. Um, let's start this out. Members of the Piraha tribe use a one too many system of counting. I ask whether speakers of this enumerant language can appreciate larger numerosities, numbers, without the benefit of words to encode them. Keep that in mind, right? There's a group of people that have a one too many number system. This addresses the classic Whorfian question about whether language can determine thoughts. Results of numerical tasks with varying cognitive demands show that numerical cognition is clearly affected by the lack of a counting system in the language. Performance with quantities greater than 3 was remarkably poor, but showed a constant coefficient of variation, which is suggestive of an analog estimation process. So there's some things going on here that even I don't know. Like, what's this analog estimation process? I'm guessing it's like the opposite of analog is binary, which is 0 and 1. So it's either there or it's not. Analog is it might be there a little bit. They're suggesting that these folks, they don't have a specific language with the numerical quantities that we understand in English or in many other languages. And so they're looking at this from a really interesting perspective. Does not having this language impact your ability to count? So I'd like you to take a moment. Like, how would you test that yourself? Before you read the article, think about how you would test it yourself. All right. And so I had to cough. It's, things. So, when I'm thinking about this, how would I test this? And it's a really hard question. Um, I don't really know. I mean, I know how they tested it, so I'm trying to think without that. But honestly, I think maybe their way may be one of the only ways I can think of to test this question. Um, and we're gonna see what happens. I love these really short pieces in science. So Science Magazine, it is the cream of the crop. If you can publish a paper in Science Magazine, for me, basically, you can rest your hat. You can call it a day. You can stop worrying about things in terms of your scientific career. You're done. You've made it. Is it possible that there are some concepts that we cannot entertain because of the language we speak? At issue here is the strongest version of Benjamin Lee Whorf's hypothesis that language can determine the nature and content of thought. Determine is not used like lightly there. The strong version of Whorf's hypothesis goes beyond the weaker claim that linguistic structure simply influences the way that we think about things in our everyday encounters. For example, recent studies suggest that language might affect how people mentally encode spatial relations and how they conceive of the nature of individual objects and their material substances. So wait, let's just stop there for a second. They're giving us some data. They're like recent evidence suggests that language affects how people remember spatial relationships. And they're talking about north, south, east, west, right? Like that's not how everybody thinks about it. Like it's interestingly and complicated. It's almost like how we refer to the mountains as, are we this way of the mountains or that way of the mountains in Denver. So that's interesting. And also how people conceive of their internal substance is based on their language. If the language holds more like bodily substance terms, you're going to be viewed as like a corporeal body, like an actual entity. However, if it's viewed with more spiritual terms, you're going to view yourself differently. So there's like all these different things going on already. However, none of these studies suggest that linguistic structures prevent us from entertaining the concepts that are available to speakers of alternative linguistic systems. So what he's saying is that no other studies actually tested the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So that's really important to know here. No other study has been able to test a specific idea, like, does not having the language actually stop you from even entertaining the concepts that are available to speakers of alternate languages. The question of whether linguistic determinism exists in the stronger sense has two parts. The first is whether languages can be incommensurate, and their terms are there terms that exist in one language that cannot be translated into another. The second is whether the lack of such translation precludes the speakers from one language from entertaining concepts that are encoded by the words or grammar of the other language. Entertain, even play with, even think with. For many years, the answer to both questions appeared to be negative, although languages might have different ways in which situations are habitually described. It has generally been accepted that there would always be some way in which one could capture the equivalent meaning in any other language. Although languages, and I'm going to read it again, might have different ways in which situations are habitually described. Languages differ in how they consistently describe things. It generally has been accepted that there would always be some way in which one could capture the equivalent meaning in any other language. Of course, when speaking of translatable concepts, we do not mean terms like molecule or quark, which would not exist in a culture without advanced scientific institutions. That's pretty arrogant. Failure to know what molecules or quarks are does not signal an inability to understand the English language. Surely some people were still speaking English before such terms were introduced. On the other hand, one would question someone's command of English if they did not understand the basic vocabulary and grammar, period. They're saying, look, this linguistic question isn't about being smart or not. It's about literally not understanding basic questions. Words that indicate numerical quantities are clearly among the basic vocabulary of language like English. Not all languages contain fully elaborated counting systems. Although no language has been recorded that completely lacks number words, there is a considerable range of counting systems that exist across cultures. Some cultures use a finite number of body parts to count 20 or 30 body tags. Many cultures use particular body parts like fingers as a recursive base for the count system, as in our 10 base system. Ever think about that? Started from our fingers. Finally, there are cultures that base their counting system on a small number between. So there's different number systems in the world between 2 and 4. There's different number systems in the world. There's quite a few between 2 and 4. Sometimes the use of a small number base is recursive and potentially infinite. For example, it is claimed that the Gumuga, sorry for that mispronunciation, caught me off guard there, South Sea Islanders counted with a recursive binary system. 1, 2, 2 prime 1, 2 prime 2, 2 prime 3, 2 prime 2, 1, 1 prime, prime prime prime, and so on until the Gamulgal, the Gamulgal figured it out. Yeah, it is hard when you come across these words and like to not pronounce them correct. But this is part of our separation of different groups of people and our own like self-centrism. You know, our egocentrism that we have has a like as a group, right? It's like we're not used to certain ways. We don't hear things a certain way because we only have one language, right? And so it becomes hard. And then also in our society, it becomes wrong to, like disrespect a group of people. And I think that's a good thing that it's wrong. But it's like, it still makes it hard sometimes. You're still like, okay. You try your best and you move on. So I'm gonna do that. So basically, before I went on that, just talking about one of those difficult aspects of reading a work, and you know what, like I am, after we're done here, gonna go look up the correct pronunciation. Now, the real point though is that they're different numbers based systems. Some of them are really small, but some of the small ones aren't actually small. The counting system that differs perhaps most from our own is the one-to-many system, where quantities beyond two are not counted, but are simply referred to as many. If a culture is limited to such a counting system, is it possible for its members to perceive or conceptualize quantities beyond the limited sets picked out by the counting sequence? Or to make which we consider to be quite trivial distinctions, such as that between 4 versus 5 objects. The Piraha are such a culture. They live along the banks of the Mesi River in the lowland Amazonian region of Brazil. They maintain a predominantly hunter-gatherer existence and reject assimilation into mainstream Brazilian culture. Now, these are folks that have fought the cultural genocide that happened. Like, can you imagine that? Think about everything you've learned in every class, right? Anything about racism or colonialism or any of that, right? Think about how tough, how strong these people are, right? Like, that's just amazing. I just want to know how it happened. How do you survive the colonizing forces that have been on our planet for a couple hundred years, right? That's pretty damn amazing to get a sense of like there are pockets of people, small pockets that have evaded that process, that have a completely different worldview than those of us whose areas have been completely colonized, either by our ancestors or to our ancestors, essentially. It's really amazing here. Um, Almost completely monolingual in their own language. Again, amazing. They have a population of less than 200 living in small villages of 10 to 20 people. They have only limited exchanges with outsiders. I'm like, maybe they can hide, if they're not super grouping together, right? Like, it makes me think how many other groups are out there like this. Is this rare? Is this more common, and would we even know? It's actually pretty cool to think about that. They have only limited exchanges with outsiders using primitive pidgin systems. Now, pidgin is it's a language that just has words. So there's no grammar to it, at least in the first generation that they're constructed. So pidgin is just like we share words that allow us to communicate. Like a group of people who speak different languages kind of come together and they pull out like a good amount of words, but not too many, that they use to communicate with each other that everybody understands. For communicating and trading goods without monetary exchange and without the use of Portuguese count words. The Piraha counting system consists of words hoi, falling tone, 1, so it's pronounced differently. So hoi and hoi, rising tone, falling tone. Larger quantities are described as, so they got 1 and 2, so they got hoi or hoi. I think, that makes sense. Larger quantities are described as bagay or ibai, and that just equals many, according to their interpretation. Now, I'm like, why do they have 2 words? I'd like to hear more on that. But ultimately, right now, they're giving us the lowdown. What's the nature of this language? What's going on there? I was able to take 3 field trips ranging from 1 week to 2 months, living with the Pirahai along with Daniel Everett and Karen Everett, 2 linguistics who have lived and worked with the tribe for over 20 years and are completely familiar with their language and cultural practices. Translation: I needed to get money out of my university to go travel. Observations were informed by their background of continuous and extensive immersion in the Piraha culture. During my visits, I became interested in the counting system of the Piraha that I had heard about and wanted to examine whether they really did have only two numbers and how this would affect, well, technically three, bro, and how would this affect their ability to perceive numerosities that extend beyond the limited count sequence. Numerosities, what a word, right? Numerosities. It's great. It means numbers large, like numerosities. It's making me laugh. It's a great word. So we're still into this, right? We're like laughing at numerosities a little bit, trying to break the mood. Year one initial observation. So on my first week long trip to the two most upriver Macy villages, I began with informal observations of the Piraha use of the number words for 1 and 2. I was also interested in the possibility that the 1-2-many system might actually be a recursive back-to system. So that's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 prime 2, 1 prime, 2 prime, 1 prime prime, 2 prime prime, things like that. That their limited number words might be supplemented by more extensive finger counting, or that there might be taboos associated with counting certain kinds of objects, as suggested by Zaslavsky in her studies of, see, I do it to Polish names too. In her studies of, I'm Polish if you didn't know, in her studies of African counting systems, Karen Everett developed some simple tasks to see if our Piraha informants could refer to numerosities of arrays of objects. Okay, numerosities, the amount in, of arrays. Arrays are just like groups of, so like an array. The only way I know it is coding. Like in coding, there are arrays all the time, but arrays just like a box of variables. So it's like, let me translate that to you. You have like an array of eggs in your egg carton, an array, right? It's like an assortment. Using Piraha terms in any finger counting system they might have. Instructions and interactions with participants were in the Piraha language when it was necessary to refer to numerosity of an array. Karen, you can see like, we'll see what table 1 refers to. I don't think we got there yet. Karen Everett used the Portuguese number words embedded in Piraha dialogue. Such terms are understood by the Piraha to be the language of Brazilians, but their meaning is not understood. Evidence? I'd like to see evidence on that point. Just based on... This is why I'm not a huge fan of some of the other social sciences. I love the ideas. I love the topics, but the method leaves me wanting. So in this study, right... he's talking about the work of Karen back there, and Karen's work clearly has been there as an anthropologist documenting life and things like that. But it's still, where's the quantity? Where's the test? Where's the hypothesis? Like where's the numbers? Where's the data? Like, if I go out in the world, I'm going to confirm my own biases by looking for things that I want to see, right? If I want to see the world as happy, I'm going to go out and look out in this COVID-19 world and go see the people having fun outside. Oh, humans have a great spirit, right? Like something like that. Or you could look at those folks on spring break and be like, oh my God, they're going to kill us all, right? Like what are you looking for? Are you going to see good things? You're going to see bad things. And I think the power of that is lost on us. And as a scientist, it's why I appreciate psychology. It's just, you have to find your data. You have to make it work. And the only way around that is either find the truth or cheat. And so, like, you try to find the truth, right? Some people try to cheat, but that's just the honesty of it. So going back to this, right? Like a statement like saying that their meaning is not understood doesn't make sense with what I know about learning. If you're exposed to something over and over again, you eventually figure it out, right? Like, and that's sort of going against, for me, some of the ideas of this paper. So if they are out there and there are some people that are exposed to trading, they should be better at numbers than other people. And that's when and you should check that out as well, right? Scientifically, you got to look for the nooks and crannies. In addition to this short session, during this first-year trip, I continuously took opportunities to probe for counting abilities in everyday situations. So, went on a vacation, paid a lot of attention to how people were counting. Ooh, we're going to see some data. The outcome of these informal studies revealed the following. There was no recursive use of the count system. So that's that 1, 2, 2, 1 prime, 2, 1 prime, 2 prime, 1 prime prime, 2 prime prime, 1 prime prime prime, 2 prime prime prime. So like that, there was no recursive use of the count system. The Piraha never used the count words in combinations like hoi hoi, right? Like to designate larger quantities. Fingers were used to supplement oral enumeration, but that was highly inaccurate even for small numbers less than 5. In addition, hoi and hoi, the words for 1 and 2, I think I missed them up there. So it would be hoi and hoi. The words for 1 and 2 were not always used to denote those quantities. Whereas the words for 2, whereas the word for 2 always denoted a larger quantity than the word for 1 when used in the same context. So look, 1 and 2 didn't always mean 1 and 2. They kind of like moved on the number line. 2 was often higher than 1. The word for 1 was sometimes used, and these are just his ideas. These are just his experiences. So I'm not a huge fan here. This isn't like science yet. The word for 1 was sometimes used to denote just a small quantity, such as 2 or 3 or sometimes more. An example of the use of counting words in finger counting is given in Table 1 in one of the informal sessions with an informant who appeared to be in his 50s. Videotape extracts from this session are included in supporting online materials. So, I actually downloaded these.
Hiện trên thì gai sai point.
Ai point kia.
Point kia.
Ai point kia ai cái bao.
Ayo. Ni cái bao point ao aga. Dois.
Ai cái bao point kia.
Point here.
Ai point.
Tres.
Ai cái bao point.
Oh, I gotta make sure. I gotta re-download these because like I want to make. Oh no! I'm gonna get us a different program to watch videos. Let me stop this and I'll be back in a second.